Hello, I'm Jeremy Mercer. I'm from Canada, and I'm here in Correo today to spend time with you. What I did, I went to live in the bookstore, and then I sort of just dropped out for 10 years, and I read for 10 years. So at that point, I was reading every day, 4 to 5 hours a day. I was reading easily 100 books a year, which is good. That's 2 books a week. So at that point, reading was my life, partly because I walk in a place like this, and I almost panic because I see so many beautiful books I haven't read. One of the things that struck me in Paris when I arrived in Paris was just how ignorant I was. And then you walk into a place like Paris and you see such a rich international, and you realize, oh my, I'm so naive. I'm so naive. James Joyce is an iconic writer in Paris. This was published by the original Shakespeare Company. So when I moved into Shakespeare Company, I said, all right, I'm gonna get serious about reading. And that's when I started reading. When I was in Paris, I was able to read. Shakespeare Company Paris, you have to read a book a day. So I read about 100 books over the 5 months. But I said, this is it. We're gonna read until we get to Ulysses. And so I just started reading. I got to Ulysses. And then I went to Dublin for Bloomsday. And it was just an incredible sense of contentment. 10 years earlier, I'd set out on this path of reading, and I'd read through 1,000 books. And now there I was in Dublin, a literary capital of the world, on Bloomsday, one of the greatest literary days in the world. And all I'd done is read it. But it was just sort of the culmination of the whole process of moving away from sort of this very fast, media-based culture to a reading culture. Yeah, that marked it. That marked the end of that journey. And so it's very important to me. To be a good reader, you have to stop the adrenaline in a way. You need to breathe, settle down. Obviously, there's no computers in Shakespeare Company, no phones. It's a completely different atmosphere, so you do slow down. And you have no money. You can't go to the movies. You can't do anything. All you can do is read. Now, I have children and a wife and horses, dogs, chickens. We're gonna get a llama. So now I carve out 2 hours a day to read. But it's just not the same way, and I set myself big goals. I'm doing Proust now. It's important to get through the classics. I bought a big old farm with an outbuilding that I'm making into my office, and it still doesn't have doors or windows. Soon I will have my couch in my office with my view, a light, my little fridge of rosé, and then it'll be great. I will defend my reading. Now it's like I just snatch parts here, and I take the train to go into the city a lot, and it's an hour there and an hour back. But that's some of my happiest times in my life, because you sit by the window, you see the Durance River, and you have an hour to read. So I guess the train defends my reading. He's named Mordecai Richler. He's my first favorite author, and just sort of like your first lover, you always remember them, and they always have a special place in your heart. He also wrote a classic Canadian novel called Duddy Kravitz, The Apprenticeship of Duddy Kravitz. It's a typical Canadian book, and it's a Canadian spirit, and I think of it almost every day right now. So then Mordecai Richler. Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. It is stunning, and this is one of the books my father gave me to read. It's the story of a father and a son who take a motorcycle journey across America, but more it's into a journey into the idea of the meaning of life, and he comes up with this idea of quality. And I think the longer I live, the longer I appreciate this idea of trying to make every moment true to yourself, true to your friends, true to your love. And it's this idea of quality. And again, there's not a single day in my life that I don't think about this book. I really can't recommend this enough. So I was a crime reporter in Canada. You're just always skimming over the surface. And it seems like every day a new tragedy, new pain, new loss. And I was doing this job, and I guess I just sort of became numb to what it all meant. And I read Truman Capote in Cold Blood, which is a deep, deep look at a crime, and a very literary look at it. And maybe there's a deeper human story that I can't see working for newspapers. If you're talking about the search for quality in your life and understanding, I need to think more like this in deeper ways. So that was a very important book for me. I now teach journalism in France. I loved gonzo journalism, Hunter S. Thompson. I think as a period it's fantastic, but that was what I was reading, and that sort of like gonzo journalism passion. It wasn't required reading, but I think it's what have pushed me towards journalism. There's also Norman Mailer wrote a great book called The Executioner's Song, a 1,000-page book. Again, almost like Capote, but not quite as literary. Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Yeah, but all that wasn't taught in school. If I was to do journalism again, I would not study journalism right away. I'd study literature and then take a master's in journalism. It's the greatest thing ever is to come to other countries, to visit bookstores in other countries. I knew Brazilian authors from bookstores in France and bookstores in Canada, bookstores in New York. But it was only when I went to Brazil that I got to discover Ruben Fonseca. And that was because Brazilians said, no, you have to read this guy. Even though he's not in the bookstores in Europe. It's the very best part of traveling, is to discover the writers and the readers in other countries. It's absolutely new knowledge. But yeah, I talk to everyone where I go and get names. I collect names. I have a list of names. Silvana. New name on my list for the train. More people now are engaging with words than ever in the history of humanity. From email to Facebook posts to blogging. I mean, people are expressing themselves in words. What I like is that it's kind of separating out the two experiences. I think it's important, all that writing. I mean, we want so much for people to be reading, and they are. They're reading more than ever. But we do have to differentiate between that experience, the shallow, superficial reading, and what happens here, where we open up, we absorb things more deeply. As a writer, one of the things that's sad about reading too much is sometimes you're not swept along in the story anymore. You're looking at the construction. You're wondering what the writer was thinking. And this is really enriching. But you know that feeling when you just get swept along and suddenly you look at the clock, it's 4 in the morning and you're still reading? That is something that I miss. Asking what should I read? That's my favorite thing to do in the world. And it's how I judge a bookstore, is what they tell me to read. It's always my first question. Like I linger around a bit and then I sort of look who looks interesting. I buy whatever they tell me to buy, which is good. I think that's a sign of a great bookstore, and it's the real power of a bookseller, is that you can introduce writers and cultures and ideas to people, and it's so powerful. It's such an important responsibility to share books and to share your love of books that you need to know what you're doing. You need to know what you're doing, and you need to know what to recommend and why you're recommending it.